tonight, The Liberation Called the Beautiful. That's the name of the talk. Am I on? Am I? Yeah, thank you. So in this series, Living Buddhism, we've looked at how we in Triratna practice a form of Buddhism that is relevant for us, living as we do so many years after the teachings of the Buddha were first heard in India. And 2 weeks ago, Satyajyoti beautifully described how we together in the Sangha in Sheffield can each contribute in our own way to creating a world where the influence of the Buddha perfumes our life and ripples out to the rest of the world for the benefit of all beings through time and space. What a beautiful ideal that is, this path that leads to freedom. And it was Sanghagita that explored and translated for us the many forms of Buddhism. And he went back to the root teachings of the Buddha as they're expressed in all the different schools. And in this series, we're exploring some of the ways that he did that. And perhaps you could argue his greatest gift to us is the emphasis he placed on the importance of beauty. So he said, the enlightenment of the Buddha was not a cold, detached knowledge. He saw with warmth, he saw with feeling, and what is more, he saw everything as being pure or Shubha, which also means beautiful. The Buddha saw everything as pure beauty. I believe that the concept of beauty is very important and valid. And one of the characteristics of beauty is that we're disinterested, and he means in the sense of that we're not trying to get something out of it. When you see a beautiful flower, you appreciate it just for its beauty. You don't want to do anything with it. You don't want to own it, take it to pieces or analyze it. You just contemplate it and appreciate it. And in this way, he says, it lifts you out of your usual preoccupation. It lifts you even beyond your ordinary self into a different kind of world. So that's what we're going to be exploring tonight. I'm going to try and explain why that should be and how we can practice the path of beauty, which leads to freedom. In some traditional schools of Buddhism, the appreciation of beauty is seen as a negative, something which keeps us attached to samsara. And you know, there might be many reasons for that, but in the fire sermon, the Buddha explains that we're hooked into samsara because of our greed, hatred, and delusion through contact with sense objects, through our senses. And don't forget, in Buddhism, the mind is a sense. So this has led some schools of Buddhism to have a strong emphasis on guarding the senses, to such a degree that they avoid looking, for example, at beautiful things in case they trigger craving. And also, by trying to see beautiful things as ugly, they can free themselves from craving. And these traditions hold that conditioned reality is ugly, and that part of insight into the true nature of things involves seeing this ugliness. And it's the translation of this word ugly that we're going to be looking at. Some monks, for example, are forbidden from enjoying music, art, or the beauty of nature, and are encouraged to undertake practices such as reflections on the repulsiveness of the body and the decomposition of a corpse. According to Sanghagita, this one-sided emphasis on ugliness is spiritually unhelpful and unhealthy. The early accounts make it clear that the Buddha enjoyed the beauty of the world around him. He appreciated beautiful moonlit groves and the beautiful scent of flowering trees. And it was the beauty of the lotus flower, that the image he used to describe the full flowering potential of human beings, that made him decide to teach in the first place. And in various suttas, he describes the beauty of his teachings, the beauty of awareness through metta, and the beauty of meditation. He says, the Buddha said, the Dharma, which is beautiful in the beginning, beautiful in the middle, and Sarah, beautiful at the end. The word he uses here for beautiful is kalyana. meaning lovely, beautiful, agreeable, generous, virtuous, auspicious, fortunate. So the Buddha is not saying that everything is ugly. He's saying that there is a higher beauty which outshines the beauty we see around us in the conditioned world. And I'm going to tell you a story that I've wanted to tell for years in a talk, and I've managed to get it in. So it's Nanda and the dove-footed nymphs. So I don't know if you know about this. So the story of Nanda and the dove-footed nymphs. So Nanda was a disciple of a young man living at the time of the Buddha, and he got married to a very, very beautiful girl, a beautiful, gorgeous young girl, and he got married to her, and then somehow found himself in the Sangha, as a disciple of the Buddha, and he just couldn't forget about his wife. He married this girl, and even though he was in the Sangha with the Buddha as part of the Buddhist Sangha, he couldn't forget about his wife. And Pranya Hridaya was reminding me before that there's a gorgeous image of her combing her hair in the window, enticing him back. And all he could think about was his wife. And the Buddha said, well, all right then. Okay, so he whisked him away and you have to kind of, imagine that this is a metaphor, or that he actually did. Either is fine. He whisked him away to a different realm. And in this realm, there were 500 dove-footed nymphs. Now, it doesn't mean to say that their feet... I think what it means is that there was a practice of painting the feet pink, the same colour as doves. So I think, lost in translation, they're called the dove-footed nymphs, but I think they've just had very beautiful, gorgeous, dainty pink feet. And so the Buddha says, if you get enlightened, I'll give you, you can join the company with these beautiful dove-footed nymphs. And Nanda is well in now. He's definitely, when he thinks about his wife, the beauty of the nymphs and his wife, they pale into insignificance. So he is definitely motivated now to practice. And so he practices very, very hard. And then the Sangha was saying to him, you're only doing it because of the nymphs. And he kind of was a bit upset by that. So he thought, right, in spite of them, I'm going to practice and I'm going to get enlightened with or without the nymphs. Anyway, story goes, he did get enlightened, and he went to the Buddha and said, I release you from your promise of allowing me to join the company of these 500 nymphs, because I've seen the beauty of enlightenment is far more beautiful than anything it's more beautiful than anything. And so that the story is an illustration of the beauty of the transcendental, the beauty of enlightenment and truth and freedom is far more beautiful than anything that we could ever encounter in the mundane world. And that the Buddha is saying that there's nothing wrong with beautiful nymphs, there's nothing wrong with beautiful wives, but the beauty of practice and the beauty of enlightenment far outshines that. And so the Buddha said, now, Bhagava, he's talking about what people have said. He said, certain recluses and Brahmins have abused me with groundless, empty lies that have no truth in them, saying, Gautama the recluse, meaning the Buddha, and his brethren have gone astray. For Gautama the recluse teaches this: when one reaches up to the release called the beautiful, and having reached it abides therein, at such time he regards the whole universe as ugly. But I never said that, Bhagava. This is what I do say. Whenever one reaches up to the release called the beautiful, then he knows indeed what beauty is. So in this book, Sangha talks about this, and he talks about the 4 viparyasas, or otherwise known as the topsy-turvies. And this teaching explains how these different takes on beauty can arise. So the Buddha was not saying that that mundane beauty is ugly. He was saying that it's not as beautiful as freedom. We interpret mundane existence, all of this, through our senses. And our interpretation is always wrong because we see things from the me in here being separate from the you out there. And it's not our fault, it's just the way we're wired. And so we get things topsy-turvy. Because we don't see things how they really are, we get things wrong. So unenlightened beings, us, see the impermanent as permanent. We see dukkha, the thing that dukkha as happiness. We see non-self as self. We had weeks and weeks on that, didn't we? And we see the unbeautiful as beautiful. We see ashura, which in some translations is ugly, but all it means is that the unbeautiful is not Shiva. That we see the unbeautiful as beautiful. I'm going to explain what that means. So these topsy-turvies, we get it wrong. We see impermanent things as permanent and as things, not processes, so life is unsatisfactory. And you might recognize these as the 3 lakshanas from the intro course. These are the 3 lakshanas from the intro course. And each one of these is a gateway to freedom, and they're all linked. By contemplating any of the lakshanas, we can break through these limiting views and see things as they really are. I'm not going to go into the detail of the lakshanas because we've done that in other talks and we perhaps will come on to them. But what we're going to look at is the 4th one, what sometimes is called the 4th lakshana. The list has one more, ashubha, interpreted sometimes as ugliness. But by contemplating our world in terms of its ashubha nature, we can break through into seeing the nature of reality in its true nature and beauty, like Nanda and the nymphs. Nanda understood and realized that beautiful as his wife was, beautiful as the nymphs were, they were not as beautiful as his experience of freedom, the freedom of the release of his mind in enlightenment. So that's where we're going with this. A more helpful translation of Ashubha is not Shubha. So our world isn't ugly. It's just not Shubha. Shubha means Shubha means splendid, bright, shining, beautiful, pleasant, radiant, agreeably, and most importantly of all, morally, ethically pure. It means lovely, pure, and good. So the Buddha never said that mundane existence was ugly. He said it was not Shubha. And that's true, isn't it? Most of the time, we don't experience the world like this. We don't experience the world as being radiant and pleasant and bright and shining and morally pure. That's most of us would have that would be true of our experience, no matter how beautiful something is. But we do have some glimpses of it. Because we interpret our mundane experience in this dualistic way, me in here is separate to everything out there, we don't see things in their fullness, in their beauty. We don't normally see their Shubha nature, no matter how beautiful they are. So the Ashubha gateway is Shubha, the liberation called the beautiful. And Shubha is something shining in a world of its own, above and beyond concrete things. So when Buddhism says that the world is Ashubha, it's not saying that the world is ugly, it's saying it's not Shubha. No matter anything that we can apprehend with our senses will not be an experience of Shubha, of the transcendental. So that when we come across something very beautiful, that can be a fantastic opportunity to enter into a relationship with it that seems to go beyond the senses. And we might be able to think of examples in our own lives where we have a sublime experience, perhaps in nature, or perhaps in communication with someone, the beauty of which seems to go deeper than the thing itself. You know, when you're in a conversation with somebody and there's real truth in the conversation, there's real love between you, and you feel really seen, and you feel like you really see that person, that there doesn't seem to be a separate me in here and a separate you out there. That could be an experience of Shubha. something really beautiful. So this it can take us by surprise. It can come out of apparently nowhere, and it has this experience of Shubha, has a clarity and connection that has the potential to change us, where even the words beauty and ugliness don't really apply. So I was once in a museum in Paris, and I've talked about this before, there was a Cambodian Buddha there, Buddha statue. And I was just standing in front of this Buddha statue, and the face was absolutely beautiful. It was absolutely beautiful. But there was something happened in the distance between me standing here and that Buddha statue standing there. Something happened where it went beyond my experience of the senses, or beyond the experience of my eyes. That's somehow there wasn't any difference between me and the Buddha. There wasn't any space between us. And it was the beauty of that face was pointing to something far more beautiful that went beyond just what I could see with my eyes. You could say that the statue was Ashubha. It was mundane. It was a lump of concrete, stone, I should say. It wasn't concrete, it was stone. But I had a glimpse through the Ashubha gateway, a glimpse into a glimpse into the way things really are, that lack of separateness that was expressed through that statue. And then another example would be there was where I lived in a particular part of Amsterdam. It was absolutely gorgeous and the house was beautiful, and I was going through a very painful period of house envy. I just wanted to live in one of these gorgeous houses, and I used to walk around them quite a lot, feeling, oh God, I wish I lived there, I wish I lived there, oh my God, this is so beautiful. And I thought, I've got to stop it, I've got to stop this, because I'm not enjoying living here, because I'm so jealous of people who live in the houses. So I started to practice this thing of thinking, okay, so just imagine that it's my house. Imagine that everything that I see is actually mine. And that is a practice that is described by a figure called Marmaki, who makes everything hers. What she does is that she doesn't have any separation, because there is no her and there is no anything else. Everything belongs to her. So that's a way of breaking down the separation. So I started to look at things as if they were mine. This Buddha figure was helping me with that. And then one day I looked at a vase, and it was beautiful. And again, the similar thing happened. There wasn't any space between me and the vase. This beautiful, beautiful piece of porcelain just took me somewhere else, to somewhere where that was just filled with love and clarity and connection. So the definition of mundane beauty as being a combination of qualities such as shape and colour and form that pleases the aesthetic senses, especially the sight. That's a definition of mundane beauty. That wasn't what was going on with that experience of the vase. There was something more. Yes, that definition would apply to the stone Buddha and the vase, but it didn't adequately describe the experience in response to them that took me completely by surprise and rooted me to the spot. And in those moments, I knew I was in touch with something very beautiful and very true. So to contemplate the Shubha aspect of reality, Ashubha as a gateway into liberation, is a wisdom practice, and it can lead us to seeing, even if it's a glimpse, of seeing the way things are, which is full of love and connection. So according to Sanghagita, an important gateway to a vision of higher beauty consists in opening up to this, opening up and learning to appreciate the beauty of the conditioned world, whether in nature or in the arts or in each other. The arts are very important to Sanghagita. One of the emphases of Triratna, which marks us out as a distinct tradition, is its emphasis on the arts and in beauty. We could say that the higher beauty the Buddha refers to when he talked about when he said, I'm not saying that things are ugly, I'm saying that when you understand the nature of reality, you know what beauty is. You could say that that beauty that he talks about there shines through the beauty that we see around us. So if we can't see that lower beauty, we won't be able to see the higher. So beautiful works of art, beautiful time in nature, beautiful friends. So when we're at our highest and our healthiest, and we're meditating and we're integrated and we're mindful and imbued with positive emotion, this is when we see the nature of things most clearly. And it's just at these times that we tend to see the world as most beautiful. This is most people's experience, and especially on retreat. We tend to be more aware, more metaphor, in other words, more in touch with the nature of reality. And retreat centres tend to be in beautiful places, but after a few days meditating, everything seems more beautiful. The landscape and the colours are more vivid, people's faces start to relax and look more beautiful. But when we're in a bad mood, if you've ever noticed this, that when the shutters are down and we're disconnected and angry or irritable, in other words, not in touch with the way things really are, which is inherently loving and connected, it's almost impossible to connect with beauty. It's not impossible, but it's harder. But it's possible to see beauty in the most ordinary things, and it's really good to look out for that. And looking with metta is the key. Beauty really is in the eye of the beholder. It's very subjective. What's beautiful to me might not be beautiful to you at all. Somebody once mentioned that, the ordinariness of beauty, and an example of that would be, a film that came out a few years ago called American Beauty, and at the beginning there's that carrier bag, the plastic bag that kind of just twirls around and dances at the beginning of the film. Very ordinary carrier bag, but the camera just stayed still and just looked, didn't say anything or didn't do anything, it just looked, and in the looking we can see the beauty. It's paying attention, that's where the beauty is. And even with things that at first glance you could call ugly, when we really contemplate with and pay attention with metta, can become really beautiful. And on what first retreat I ever went on, we did these things called communication exercises. The particular ones that we do, you're asked to sit with somebody and just contemplate them, just gaze. Held exercise, and it's a very beautiful thing to do, I think now, but I was terrified and didn't want to do it, obviously. I just didn't want to do it. I thought it was weird. And it was my first retreat, and I was very frightened, but I did it anyway. But the woman I was sat with, I was placed with, had quite a severe disfigurement in one of her eyes, and it had scars across. And I sat opposite her, and at first there was aversion. I found it quite difficult and awkward. But after a few moments of gazing and looking at her face with full attention, I could start to see that actually the purple of the scar had this beautiful kind of richness in it and different colours in it. And by the end of the exercise, I thought her eye was beautiful. And that sounds trite, doesn't it? It sounds like, oh yeah, but it was really, really true. That's something that on first look can seem to be extremely something that you would not think of as a beautiful thing, definitely became beautiful because I was looking at it with attention, and I was paying attention to it, and with a loving eye. So it would seem that, and that was how things were. That was true, that there was truth in it. And so Lama, one of the stories that Sangha gives us is he had a really good friend called Lama Govinda. And in this book, which is a collection of various things, I don't know where it originally was, probably in his memoirs. So he's talking about how putting our emphasis on beauty rather than ugliness, and finding more and more beauty in our lives, how that can be a way of seeing with clarity. Better to apprehend an altogether higher beauty, a beauty that is not reliant on physical conditions at all, which was what my experience of this woman's eye. My connection with her wasn't dependent on the physical. Lama Govinda made this the theme of a short story called "Look Deeper!" The narrator is walking along a road with a monk when a young village girl passes them by. "What a beautiful girl," says the narrator, whereupon the monk, as might be expected, replies, "Look deeper, it's only a bag of bones." At this point, the Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara manifests before them, and in turn tells the monk to look deeper still, to look deeper than the bag of bones, and see the living, suffering human being with all her potential for spiritual development. The beauty we experience through the senses is not the highest beauty available to us. And when we have some experience of this higher beauty, we are at last able to shake off the hold that worldly desire has on us. So much better to practice this gateway of Ashubha as a path of appreciating beauty. It's also more likely to spark something in us than a path of seeing ugliness. We love what is beautiful, and we naturally move towards what we love. If we can see the beauty of ethical, selfless actions, if we can see the beauty of higher meditative states, if we can see the beauty of wisdom, the beauty in communication with a loved one, if we can see the beauty of that undefinable beyond that seems to call us, then we will move towards these things quite naturally. We will make progress. And in those moments in front of the Cambodian Buddha, in front of the vase, in front of the woman with the scars on her eyes, I felt so full of love that there didn't seem to be any space between them and me, and it changed me. And I grew from those experiences of beauty. When we're deeply in touch with the nature of reality, with the way things are, that is metta. So how do we open up to beauty as part of our spiritual path? How do we start thinking in those terms? First of all, we can become aware of the tendencies of our mind in this area. Do we look for beauty? Is beauty alive in our lives? Sanghagita said, "You haven't come into existence after all these millions of years of evolution just to sit down in front of a typewriter or keep accounts." You know, there's a really strong emphasis to celebrate our existence, our precious human birth. Our potential for enlightenment is truly beautiful. And we can reflect on that for ourselves. Do I see my birth as a cause of celebration of the beauty of my life? And if we don't, why don't we? Is beauty alive in our lives? And what do we mean when we're talking about it? When we're looking at things in a utilitarian way? I used to lead a choir in Walkley, and the potential for beauty was huge there. And there were moments of beauty. But when I heard that bell ring and they walked in the door, what I saw were little walking pound signs, because they were going to pay me and I was trying to make my living out of making the choir. And it was so hard to just let go of that utilitarian need for people to come in and join in and just to concentrate on the beauty of the sounds we were going to make. It's really hard. It can be hard to let go of that. So we can either begin or reinvigorate a relationship with beauty through art galleries, music of all kinds, poetry, literature, architecture, more time away, outdoors, away from our phones. Might allow ourselves to experience the wonder and reverence in the natural world, bowing to trees, bowing to beautiful views. Meditation. As our mindfulness and metta increase, our experience of beauty is enriched and the world becomes more alive. The more beauty we experienced in the conditioned world, the more we'll be able to open to the experience that the Buddha refers to. It's a bit like looking beyond the stained glass window to the sunlight shining through it. But it's a bit like trying to get a meditation experience, trying to get an experience of Shubha. The more you try to make it happen, the more elusive it becomes. We can't make it happen, but we can set up the conditions so that it can arise. And what we truly long for. Do we long for community and connection? There is beauty in that. Do we long for an ethical world? There is beauty in that. Purpose and meaning is beauty, and freedom is beauty. Whatever, it points towards the goal and can motivate us to move towards it. So what worldly activities do we love? Are there higher aims behind the love? You know, if it's football, it could be teamwork and bonding in a common cause. If it's climbing, it could be a search for excellence, challenge and self-improvement. I was watching, it was a big day on Saturday in football, and there was one of the teams, I think it was Luton, the manager was talking about, we'll always want more. We'll always want more. He's talking about building the team. And I thought, God, yeah, we do. We always want more. And then I started to watch what he was saying on the program in terms of imagining what they were talking about was enlightenment. And I thought, God, you know, if I put as much effort into that, into my search for freedom, as I do for so many other things in my life, I'd be enlightened next week. There's nothing wrong with these worldly things. There's absolutely nothing wrong with football, with, you know, the worldly things that we enjoy. In fact, we should enjoy them. There's absolutely nothing wrong with them. But without a wider dharmic perspective, they're just things in themselves. But if we can see beauty in them, perhaps that might be a way of connecting with the beauty of Shubha that helps us to get closer to real freedom. Pranya Hridaya introduced me to somebody called John O'Donoghue this week, and I'd never heard of him before. He's seems to be a beautiful human being with not a Buddhist. And he in this little quotation I'm going to finish with, he talks about soul, and you know, I want you to kind of translate that to how we might talk about spirit and our desire for the Dharma. So he said that beauty is not something you can take or leave. It's a vital necessity of life, which actually Sanghagita has said more than once. Beauty is an inner light which radiates from the soul, and this light helps us in our journey through life. That's it.